Have you ever wondered who your real friends are, the ones who'd stay even if you had nothing left to offer? What if I told you that a person's true character doesn't show when you're winning, but when you're no longer useful to them? Because when the lights go off, the music fades, and you're standing in silence, that's when the masks begin to fall and the truth walks in. Let me share something raw and real about human nature, something most people don't discover until it's already too late. You never truly know who someone is until you have nothing left to give them. When your hands are empty, when your phone stops ringing, when your spotlight dims, watch carefully. That's the moment their true self steps forward. It's easy for people to be sweet when you're shining, when you're on top, when you're making things happen. Anyone can put on a kind face when they're gaining from your glow. A smile costs nothing when someone wants something from you. But the second your value isn't obvious, the second you're no longer in a position to offer favors, that's when their real attitude comes out. Have you ever noticed how people change when your season shifts? When the applause dies down and your life isn't as useful to them anymore. That's the test. The way someone treats you when you have nothing left to give, that's the clearest window into their heart. Because we live in a world where too many connections are built on transactions, not truth. Where people admire what you do but rarely care about who you are. They'll stay close while you're beneficial, but once you stop serving their ambition or fitting into their plan, they vanish like fog at sunrise. It's not love. It's not loyalty. It's convenience wrapped in affection. But here's the thing, don't let it harden you. Let it teach you. Sometimes God allows people to leave so you can finally see what they were really standing for. He doesn't reveal the truth to break your heart, but to free it from illusions, from false loyalty, from relationships that were never rooted in love. So when the silence comes, when the crowds fade and the support disappears, listen closely. That silence, it speaks louder than any words ever could. Because in the absence, truth is revealed. And speaking of truth, there are two things you should always pay attention to when you really want to see someone's character: when the spotlight fades and you're left in silence, that's when real character starts talking. Let me share something real, something most people only learn after they've been hurt. You never fully know a person until you stop being valuable to them. Not when you're helping them. Not when you're shining. Not when your hands are full. But when your hands are empty. When your phone goes quiet. When your presence no longer serves their agenda, that's when the truth begins to speak. You see, kindness is easy when there's something to gain. It's not hard to smile when you want a favor. Compliments come cheap when they're chasing your spotlight. But what happens when you're no longer a benefit to them? That's the moment when facades begin to fall. Imagine this: you're in a room full of people, and suddenly, the music stops. The applause fades. You're no longer the center of attention. Now watch who stays close. Who checks in. Who still calls, not because they need something, but because they care. That's who they really are. The world we live in today is loud with ambition and full of superficial praise. People are drawn to your gift, not always to your heart. They love your productivity, not your personality. And as long as you're contributing to their climb, they'll stick around. But the moment you stop being useful, they disappear like they were never there. It's not friendship. It's not loyalty. It's not love. It's usage, dressed up as affection. But hear me, don't get bitter. Don't let their departure define your value. Let it reveal their truth. Sometimes God allows people to walk away, not to punish you but to protect you. He removes illusion so you can stop investing in empty wells. When someone exits your life with ease, it doesn't mean you failed. It means they were never built to walk the full journey with you. And that's okay, because not everyone clapping is actually cheering for you. Not everyone standing next to you is really standing for you. If their love had strings attached, if their presence depended on your performance, then their absence is your blessing in disguise. So when the room empties and the silence gets loud, don't panic. Pay attention. That silence will say more than any sweet words ever did, because how someone leaves will always teach you more than how they entered. And that brings us to something powerful. If you really want to see a person's true character, pay attention to just two things. Let's dive into the first one because this one will change the way you see people forever. So, if you truly want to know someone's character, here's the first thing you should watch. Watch how they treat you when they no longer need you. Not when things are good. Not when you're the answer to their problems or the bridge to their dreams. No. Watch closely when you've got nothing left to give. That's when the truth steps out from behind the curtain. People are really good at putting on performances when they want something. They'll smile. They'll flatter. They'll text back quickly. But the moment the benefit fades, so does their attention. Have you ever experienced that? Not when you're the answer to their problems or the bridge to their dreams. No. Watch closely when you've got nothing left to give. That's when the truth steps out from behind the curtain. People are really good at putting on performances when they want something. They'll smile. They'll flatter. They'll text back quickly. But the moment the benefit fades, so does their attention. Have you ever experienced that? One moment you're surrounded by people, calls, messages, invitations because you had something they needed. Maybe it was your help, your platform, your advice, your connections. And then suddenly, when your season shifts, when you hit a rough patch, when your value to them disappears, so do they. That's the moment you realize they weren't really walking with you. They were walking with what you could do for them. This is one of the most painful but most powerful revelations in life. When someone you thought was loyal begins to distance themselves, not because you hurt them, but because you could no longer serve their purpose. You see them clearly for the first time. They treated you like a stepping stone, not a person. A convenience, not a companion. They weren't staying out of love. They were staying out of benefit. You can tell the difference. Love doesn't vanish when things get inconvenient. Loyalty doesn't evaporate just because the blessings stop flowing. People who are truly for you, they don't disappear in the drought. They sit with you in it. See, we often confuse closeness with commitment. We think they're always around, they must care, but proximity doesn't always mean loyalty. Some people stay close just long enough to soak up the blessings. And the moment that stream dries up, they're gone. But don't let that discourage you. Don't let it make you bitter. Let it make you wiser. Let it refine your discernment, because some exits are divine. Some people had to leave so God could reveal what they were truly made of. It's not a rejection, it's a redirection. A rescue from false connection. And maybe right now, you're in that place. The applause has stopped. The room has emptied out. The phone is quiet. You feel forgotten. Abandoned even. But let me tell you something, you're not forgotten. You're not alone. You're being protected. Because the absence of some people is the clearest evidence of your growth. God will often let the support vanish so the truth can surface. He'll strip away the noise so you can hear His voice. And in that stillness, He teaches you to stop investing in hollow relationships that can't hold your purpose. You begin to understand your worth is not in how much you give, but in who you are without the giving. And those who really see you, they'll still be there when you have nothing to offer but your honesty. Those are the ones to hold close. They're rare, but they're real. So next time someone walks away, when you stop serving their goals, don't chase, don't beg. Let them go. Let them exit with grace. Because if their presence was tied to your performance, their absence is your breakthrough. And now that you know the first thing to watch, how people treat you when you're no longer useful, there's one more test that's just as revealing. It's subtle. It's powerful. And it exposes something deeper. Now here's the second thing you must pay close attention to if you truly want to know someone's character. Watch how they treat you when you start protecting your peace. Because here's what no one tells you the moment you begin to set boundaries. The moment you start saying no without explaining yourself. The moment you stop shrinking just to make other people feel comfortable. You won't just find peace. You'll also find out who was only ever there for their own convenience. It's not during the easy, flowing moments of connection that people reveal their true selves. But when you draw a line gently but firmly and finally say, "That's enough," that's when things shift. That's when the real temperature of the relationship rises to the surface and shows whether their love was built on freedom or on control, because boundaries don't push away good people. They expose entitled ones. They rattle those who were comfortable using your silence as permission. The moment you begin to take your time seriously, to protect your emotional space, to speak up instead of constantly making room for dysfunction, you'll notice something. Some people will suddenly withdraw. Some will accuse you of changing. Some will act offended, as if you've somehow betrayed them simply by becoming healthier. But you didn't change. You simply stopped performing. You stopped bending, breaking, softening your voice just so they could be louder. And those who depended on your silence will now call your strength disrespect. You'll hear things like, "You've got an attitude now," or "You think you're better than everyone." But what they're really saying is, "You're no longer easy to use." Double quotes. See, the truth is, when you begin to walk in clarity, when you value your voice, when you move with purpose instead of guilt, you'll make people uncomfortable not because you're wrong, but because your growth confronts their comfort. And that's the paradox of self-respect. It doesn't just change how you see others. It changes how others see you. And not everyone will celebrate that. Because some people didn't love you, they loved the version of you that didn't ask for anything in return. The moment you rise into wholeness, into discernment, into strength, you'll find yourself walking lighter but also lonelier at first. And that's okay. Because some people were only assigned to the version of you that tolerated chaos. They were never prepared to meet the version of you that walks in peace. And listen, I know how painful it can be when you finally speak up and suddenly the people you thought would support you begin to vanish. When the people who once praised your kindness now twist your firmness into cruelty. When your no becomes the trigger for their withdrawal, not because you were wrong, but because they never respected your right to say it in the first place. But don't grieve what was never rooted in truth. Don't beg for connections that only survived in your silence. Don't blame yourself for finally choosing self-respect. You see, when someone gets angry at your boundaries, what they're really revealing is how much they felt entitled to your sacrifice. That's not love. That's control. That's dependency, not devotion. So if you want to know someone's heart, watch how they react when you stop making yourself small to make them comfortable. Watch how they behave when you finally start choosing your own peace over their preferences. Because the people who truly love you won't flinch when you draw a line. They may not understand it right away, but they'll adjust. They'll lean in with care, not condemnation. They'll ask, "What do you need?" instead of saying, "How dare you?" That's what character looks like. Not in words, not in applause, not in how loudly they say "I'm here," but in how gently they stay when you decide to change. And speaking of change, sometimes the most powerful transformation comes not from what you start doing but from what you stop allowing. Now that we've talked about how people behave when they no longer need you, let's move to the second truth teller of someone's character. Watch how they respond when you begin to set boundaries. Because nothing shakes up shallow connections faster than the quiet, calm firmness of someone who's decided to stop living in guilt and start living in peace. It's not during times of agreement that people's intentions become clear, but in the moments when you finally speak up and say, "I can't keep doing this," or "I need some space," or simply "No." You see, most people are fine with your kindness, until it comes with clarity. They're fine with your generosity, as long as you don't ask for reciprocity. They'll celebrate your heart, until that heart begins to recognize its worth. Boundaries don't create problems. They reveal them, because the second you stop saying yes out of fear, or obligation, or habit, the second you stop explaining yourself, overcompensating, overgiving, overextending, some people will take it personally. And that's because they never expected you to value yourself. They were comfortable with the version of you that bent without breaking, gave without limits, and stayed silent even when you were hurting. But when you begin to evolve, when you start using your voice not to argue, but to protect your peace, you'll notice a change. Not in yourself, but in them. They'll say you're acting different. They'll say you're distant, cold, not who you used to be. But the truth is, they were only connected to the version of you that tolerated being drained. And now that you're finally choosing self-respect over people-pleasing, their access feels threatened. Let's be honest, there are people in your life right now who never really knew the real you. They only knew the version of you who said yes out of guilt. They knew the person who bit their tongue to keep the peace, who allowed dysfunction to stay hidden behind politeness, who wore themselves out, trying to keep relationships from breaking even while you yourself were breaking inside. But boundaries, they don't just protect your energy, they expose expectations. They show who was here because they loved you, and who was here because they could use you. When you say I need time, some people will get quiet. When you say I can't do this anymore, some will try to shame you. When you start showing up for yourself, those who benefited from your silence will label your peace as pride, your healing as distance, your self-awareness as rebellion. But don't be discouraged. Don't let their reaction make you question your growth, because that response, that pullback, that tension, that subtle guilt tripping is not random. It's revelation. It's the curtain being pulled back on the real foundation of that relationship. And listen, it hurts. It hurts to realize that what you thought was love was actually control. It hurts to see that your kindness was used as cover for someone's entitlement. But that pain is the beginning of wisdom. It's the moment you learn that love without respect isn't love at all. It's possession. And peace isn't found in constantly bending, it's found in knowing when to stop bending. You're not called to be a doormat. You're not required to exhaust yourself for the sake of someone else's comfort. And when God begins to open your eyes, when He begins to stretch your understanding, when He gives you the courage to finally speak truth, He's not pushing you to be harsh, He's pulling you into wholeness. Don't confuse your discomfort with disobedience. Just because someone is disappointed in your boundary doesn't mean you've done something wrong. Sometimes the very people who claim to love you will react the worst when you begin to love yourself. But hold the line. Stay firm, because God is not asking you to keep everyone happy. He's asking you to walk in truth. And sometimes, walking in truth means walking away from those who only know how to love you when you were easy to use. You are not selfish for wanting clarity. You are not unloving for protecting your soul. You are not rebellious for refusing to keep playing a role that was never meant to define you. You are finally waking up. And those who truly care about you will not panic when you find your voice. They'll honor it. They'll adjust. They'll grow with you. Because love that's real doesn't fight growth, it makes room for it. And now that we've uncovered the clearest ways to see someone's character through their response to your lack, and their reaction to your boundaries, let's go deeper. Let's talk about what happens when you are the one in control, because that's a test of character. 2. We've talked about how someone reveals their true heart when they no longer need you, and how their reaction to your boundaries says everything about their motives. But now we need to look at another angle, one that's often overlooked, yet just as powerful in exposing who a person really is: how they behave when the power is in their hands. Because character isn't only revealed in seasons of loss or moments of need, it's equally exposed in times of advantage. It's one thing to act kind when you're on level ground, when everything feels fair, when no one holds leverage. But what happens when the scales tilt, when you hold the upper hand, when someone else is at your mercy and the choice is yours to help or to harm, to lift or to humiliate? That's when the mask slips, not because of pressure, but because of privilege. There's something incredibly revealing about how a person handles moments of authority, moments when they could clap back, get even, or assert their dominance with no one there to question their decision. It's easy to preach about mercy when you're the one needing it, to talk about grace when you're the one hoping to receive it. But what happens when you're standing tall and someone else has fallen? Do you extend a hand? Or do you raise a finger? Do you speak life? Or do you expose weakness? True character is revealed not when you're vulnerable, but when you could retaliate and no one would blame you if you did. The spotlight of power reveals the shadows of the heart, because the temptation to repay hurt with hurt, to mirror what was done to you, to finally seize the chance to teach them a lesson, that temptation exposes whether you're ruled by pain or led by purpose. I've seen people who were humble when they had nothing, soft when they were seeking help. But the moment they tasted recognition, influence, or even the smallest taste of elevation, they changed. They spoke differently. They looked down instead of lifting up. They used the same platforms that once rescued them to now judge others who were struggling the same way they once did. And here's the tragedy: power, if not grounded in humility, can become a mirror that only reflects pride. There are people who have forgotten where they came from, who helped them, and what it felt like to cry out in dark seasons, and instead of using their strength to build, they use it to belittle. But that's not maturity. That's unresolved insecurity in disguise. If you want to see a person's truest self, don't just look at how they treat their friends or their mentors, or people who can promote them. Look at how they treat the ones who have nothing to offer, the ones who are inconvenient, the ones who stumble in public or fail in private. Do they cover or do they condemn? Do they restore or do they ridicule? Because the real test of spiritual depth is not how someone speaks in church, not how loud their prayers sound, not how many verses they can quote, but how quietly they choose restraint when revenge is within reach. And sometimes, the most powerful acts of integrity are not in what you do, but in what you choose not to do. The angry message you didn't send, the truth you held back instead of weaponizing, the door you closed gently, even though you had every right to slam it shut. Those moments, though silent, echo loudly in the realm of heaven, because God doesn't just see your reaction, He sees your restraint. He honors the decisions you made in private when your emotions wanted to explode but your spirit said, wait. Those are the choices that mark a soul He can trust. And let's be clear, choosing grace doesn't mean becoming a doormat. It doesn't mean allowing toxic people to walk all over you in the name of meekness. But there is a sacred difference between protecting your peace and punishing someone just because you finally can. There is a strength in letting God vindicate you while you step back in wisdom, not in weakness but in alignment with something higher. Because one day, just like David in the cave with Saul, you'll find yourself holding the opportunity to destroy someone who once tried to destroy you. And in that moment, your decision won't just define the moment, it will define you. And now that we've seen how character responds to power, let's look at something even deeper. How someone treats those who can do absolutely nothing for them. Now that we've talked about how people behave when they no longer need you, let's move to the second truth teller of someone's character. Watch how they respond when you begin to set boundaries. Because nothing shakes up shallow connections faster than the quiet, calm firmness of someone who's decided to stop living in guilt and start Living in peace. It's not during times of agreement that people's intentions become clear, but in the moments when you finally speak up and say, I can't keep doing this, or I need some space, or simply no. You see, most people are fine with your kindness, until it comes with clarity. They're fine with your generosity, as long as you don't ask for reciprocity. They'll celebrate your heart, until that heart begins to recognize its worth. Boundaries don't create problems. They reveal them. Because the second you stop saying yes out of fear, or obligation, or habit, the second you stop explaining yourself, overcompensating, overgiving, overextending, some people will take it personally. And that's because they never expected you to value yourself. They were comfortable with the version of you that bent without breaking, gave without limits, and stayed silent even when you were hurting. But when you begin to evolve, when you start using your voice not to argue, but to protect your peace, you'll notice a change. Not in yourself, but in them. They'll say you're acting different. They'll say you're distant, cold, not who you used to be. But the truth is, they were only connected to the version of you that tolerated being drained. And now that you're finally choosing self-respect over people-pleasing, their access feels threatened. Let's be honest, there are people in your life right now who never really knew the real you. They only knew the version of you who said yes out of guilt. They knew the person who bit their tongue to keep the peace, who allowed dysfunction to stay hidden behind politeness, who wore themselves out trying to keep relationships from breaking even while you yourself were breaking inside. But boundaries, they don't just protect your energy, they expose expectations. They show who was here because they loved you, and who was here because they could use you. When you say anytime, some people will get quiet. When you say I can't do this anymore, some will try to shame you. When you start showing up for yourself, those who benefited from your silence will label your peace as pride, your healing as distance, your self-awareness as rebellion. But don't be discouraged. Don't let their reaction make you question your growth. Because that response, that pullback, that tension, that subtle guilt tripping is not random. It's revelation. It's the curtain being pulled back on the real foundation of that relationship. And listen, it hurts. It hurts to realize that what you thought was love was actually control. It hurts to see that your kindness was used as cover for someone's entitlement. But that pain is the beginning of wisdom. It's the moment you learn that love without respect isn't love at all. It's possession. And peace isn't found in constantly bending, it's found in knowing when to stop bending. You're not called to be a doormat. You're not required to exhaust yourself for the sake of someone else's comfort. And when God begins to open your eyes, when He begins to stretch your understanding, when He gives you the courage to finally speak truth, He's not pushing you to be harsh, He's pulling you into wholeness. Don't confuse your discomfort with disobedience. Just because someone is disappointed in your boundary doesn't mean you've done something wrong. Sometimes the very people who claim to love you will react the worst when you begin to love yourself. But hold the line. Stay firm. Because God is not asking you to keep everyone happy. He's asking you to walk in truth. And sometimes, walking in truth means walking away from those who only knew how to love you when you were easy to use. You are not selfish for wanting clarity. You are not unloving for protecting your soul. You are not rebellious for refusing to keep playing a role that was never meant to define you. You are finally waking up. And those who truly care about you will not panic when you find your voice. They'll honor it. They'll adjust. They'll grow with you. Because love that's real doesn't fight growth, it makes room for it. And now that we've uncovered the two clearest ways to see someone's character through their response to your lack, and their reaction to your boundaries, let's go deeper. Let's talk about what happens when you are the one in control, because that's a test of character. If watching how someone treats you when they no longer need you reveals the depth of their loyalty, and observing how they respond when you set boundaries shows their respect for your dignity. Then there's yet another layer, often overlooked, but deeply telling. How does someone behave when the power is in their hands? Because as much as character is revealed in weakness, it is just as deeply exposed in strength. It's easy to ask for grace when you're on the ground, to preach forgiveness when you've made the mistake, cry for compassion when you are the one needing a second chance. But the real test, the true mirror of a person's soul, is how they treat others when they're standing tall, when they hold the advantage, when retaliation is not only possible, but justified. When someone wrongs you, and you have every right to return the favor. When someone talks behind your back, and the opportunity comes to humiliate them. When someone betrays you, and the moment arrives when you could turn the tables. How you respond in those moments doesn't just show your control, it reveals your character. I've seen people who were humble while hungry, kind while overlooked, generous when small, but the moment life handed them a platform, a title, a little success, they shifted. They forgot the nights they cried for help, the people who stood beside them when no one else cared, the mentors who lifted them, the friends who carried them. And instead of letting that memory mold them into protectors, they became persecutors. They used their position not to build, but to belittle. They confused influence with importance. They mistook applause as permission to abandon grace. But real strength doesn't need to prove itself through control or cruelty. Real strength is measured in restraint. Just because you have the upper hand doesn't mean you're meant to strike. Just because someone hurt you doesn't mean you're called to hurt them back. And just because you're in the position to expose someone's flaws doesn't mean you should stand on their weakness to elevate your own image. Character is revealed not in the fire of reaction, but in the stillness of choice. When you could destroy, but choose to protect. When you could shame, but choose to stay silent. When you could walk away with vengeance, but instead walk forward with grace. I think of David, hiding in the shadows of a cave, with his enemy asleep and completely vulnerable before him. He had every reason to strike. Saul had been hunting him, threatening him, dishonoring him, yet David chose not to act. Not because Saul deserved mercy, but because David's heart was anchored in something higher than revenge. He understood that the opportunity to do something doesn't always equal permission from God to do it. That is maturity. That is trust. That is character in its purest, rawest form, choosing what is right when no one is watching, when no one would blame you for doing the opposite. You see, some of the most powerful moments in life won't be defined by what you did, but by what you chose not to do. The words you held back, the gossip you didn't repeat, the clapback you swallowed, the door you closed gently even though it could have been slammed shut. Those choices echo in eternity. They whisper to heaven. This one can be trusted, because restraint is strength in its most refined form. And in a world that celebrates retaliation, where revenge is glorified, where people keep score and call it wisdom, there is something eternally powerful about choosing the higher road, not to appear better, not to posture as holy, but because you've been through enough darkness to know that wounding someone else doesn't heal the wound in you. So when that moment comes, because it always does, when you're in the position to repay someone for the pain they caused, when you could crush them with your silence, or your words, or your distance, ask yourself, will this move reflect my healing or my hurt? Will this action grow my spirit or gratify my ego? Because if the only way you feel powerful is by making someone else feel small, then your power is rooted in pain, not purpose. True character is not about never being hurt, it's about how you handle the power when you've survived the hurt. You can be strong and still be kind. You can be justified and still be merciful. You can be honest without being harsh. Because grace doesn't mean you ignore the damage. It means you refuse to become the same kind of person who caused it. And if you're ever wondering whether it's weakness to walk away quietly instead of retaliating, let me assure you it takes far more strength to choose peace than to pursue revenge. Let them talk. Let them twist the story. You don't need to match their immaturity with your energy, because integrity doesn't shout, it stands. And God sees the one who walked away not out of fear, but out of faith. And with that kind of posture, with that kind of anchored character, you're ready for what comes next, because the truest test of your heart is how you treat those who have nothing to offer you at all. If power reveals who you are when you have the upper hand, then there's an even subtler, quieter test of character that often slips past unnoticed. How do you treat the ones who can offer you nothing? Not the ones who can open doors for you. Not the ones who can elevate your career. Not the ones whose approval wins you favor, but the invisible, the overlooked. The ones whose presence brings no benefit to your own plans. This world has taught us, whether we realize it or not, to size people up by what they can give us: opportunity, status, access. And in doing so, we've begun to value others not by who they are, but by what they can do. But the clearest picture of someone's soul is how they behave when there is no transaction on the table, no benefit to be gained, no spotlight to reward their kindness. It's not how someone treats their boss or their audience or the influencer they want to impress that reveals their true heart. It's how they speak to the janitor in the hallway, the waiter at the restaurant, the child with no eloquence, the elderly woman who walks slowly, the person asking for help who cannot give anything back in return, because it's easy to be kind. When kindness builds your brand, it's easy to be generous when someone is watching. But true character never needs a stage. It moves quietly, consistently, humbly, even when there's no one to clap. You see, there are people who carry charm like a currency. They know how to speak to the powerful, how to flatter those in charge, how to position themselves for the next opportunity. But watch closely when someone enters the room who has no influence, someone who's socially invisible, someone who has nothing to offer them. How do they act then? Because that's not strategy, that's soul. Some people smile at the rich and roll their eyes at the poor. They bend over backwards to serve the well-known but treat those who serve them as disposable. That's not excellence, that's arrogance in disguise, and it will always crack. Eventually, because God sees what man ignores. He weighs the heart, not the highlight reel. He looks past the curated image and listens for compassion, for humility, for quiet honor in the places no one else is paying attention to. But I've seen the opposite. To the quiet ones who show up early, who remember names others forget, who say thank you not for show but from the soul. They're not flashy, but their love runs deep. They don't need recognition to offer respect. They don't need an audience to be consistent. And that is legacy. So let me ask you something you may not have asked yourself in a while. Who are you when no one is looking? Can you still be gracious when the room is empty? Can you still serve with excellence when the applause has stopped? Can you still love well when there is absolutely nothing to gain? Because that, right there, is the gold. That's what echoes into eternity, not your resume, not your connections, not the praise of people, but your kindness, your humility, your willingness to stop for the ones the world passes by. And sometimes, the people who show up in your path aren't placed there for you to judge or ignore. They're placed there for you to reveal your heart. Because God doesn't just test your faith through trials, He also tests your character through interruptions. That person who can't repay you. That's your invitation to show grace. That child who needs encouragement but has no influence. That's your moment to speak life. That elderly man who moves slowly in line. That's your opportunity to show the heart of Christ, not in theory, but in action. You don't need a pulpit to preach. You don't need a crowd to lead. You just need eyes to see what matters and a heart willing to stop. And if you've ever wondered what makes someone truly great, it's not their platform. It's not their popularity. It's what they do with the quiet moments no one sees. In a world obsessed with platforms, with profiles, with optics and applause, we've come to believe that greatness is built in the spotlight when in reality, true greatness is forged in the quiet, unrewarded moments, in the small decisions no one claps for, in the gentle responses that no one notices but heaven. We've been conditioned to chase the visible, to think that status equals substance, that influence equals integrity. But if you really want to measure a person's character, don't look at how they perform when the cameras are rolling. Look at what they do when there's no reward, no recognition, and no one around to say good job. Because the truth is, who you are in silence says more than what you say in public. I've seen people who will post about compassion, speak eloquently about kindness, quote scriptures about love, yet walk right past someone in need as if they were invisible. I've seen others, quieter souls, who never ask for credit but never miss an opportunity to care. They'll buy food for a hungry child without filming it. They'll give their coat to someone in the cold without telling a soul. They'll slow down to help an elderly person cross the street, not because it gets them praise, but because their heart was built for empathy, not applause. That's the difference. Some treat kindness like a campaign strategy, something to wear when it benefits them. Others live it, breathe it, embody it, especially when no one's watching. And if you ever doubt this truth, just look around. How many people bend over backwards for those who can elevate their image, while ignoring the ones who carry no social capital at all? How many smile up the ladder, but frown at those beneath them? How many use charm as currency while their real heart stays hidden? But God sees it all. He sees what others miss. He weighs the motive, not just the motion. He examines not only what we do, but why we do it. You can preach about grace and still walk past someone who needs it. You can talk about love while withholding it from those who can't pay you back. And that's why character is never seasonal, never situational, never adjustable based on who's watching. It's steady, consistent, rooted in something deeper than ego or performance. If someone only acts kind when it's profitable, when it advances their agenda, that's not kindness, that's calculation. If someone only shows up for the popular, but avoids the overlooked, that's not integrity, that's image management. But when someone treats the janitor like the CEO, the stranger like a brother, the broken like royalty, that's when you've found someone whose character is real. You don't need to wear a title to leave a legacy. You don't need a platform to carry weight in heaven. The people who will echo in eternity aren't always the loudest on earth. They're the ones who stayed steady, faithful, humble, and honest in the places no one thought to look. And I want to challenge you gently but honestly, when was the last time you extended kindness to someone who had absolutely nothing to offer you? When was the last time you sacrificed convenience to show compassion? Gave up your comfort to lift someone else's burden, not because you had to, but because your spirit compelled you. Because in the end, the world may reward image, but heaven honors intention. And that brings us to a question even deeper than how others behave. What happens when we turn the mirror around? Up until now, we've talked about watching other people, how they act when they don't need you, how they respond to your boundaries, how they use their power, how they treat the ones who can't repay them. But there comes a point in every journey of growth where you have to stop looking outward and start looking inward. Because the truth is, you can't just use these tests on others. You have to hold them up like a mirror to yourself. Maybe, just maybe, as you've been listening, part of you is quietly wondering, what if I've done this too? What if I've been the one who showed up strong but didn't stay consistent? What if I've walked away from people who could no longer benefit me? What if I've offered love, but only when it was convenient, and if that realization stings? If it touches something real in you, I want you to know that's not condemnation, that's invitation, because God doesn't reveal our flaws to shame us. He reveals them so we can realign. He shows us where we've fallen short, not to break us, but to rebuild us with deeper roots. He's not after perfection, he's after direction. And the direction he's calling you into is one of integrity, endurance, faithfulness, and quiet strength. Maybe you've started things with fire but lacked the consistency to finish. Maybe you've let your loyalty depend on how inspired you felt, or how emotionally charged the moment was. Maybe you've shown up strong in the beginning, loud, supportive, all in, but when things got boring, when the shine wore off, when the routine kicked in, your passion drifted, and so did your presence. But let me encourage you, this moment right here can be the beginning of something different. You don't have to carry the guilt of inconsistency, just the willingness to grow out of it. Because anyone can be great for a day. Anyone can offer kindness in a moment of high energy. Anyone can show up strong when it's exciting, when it's public, when the emotion is fresh. But true character is not defined by how brightly you burn for a second, it's defined by how faithfully you keep showing up, over and over, even when it's not glamorous, even when no one sees. If you've been the person who fades too quickly, whose loyalty is seasonal, whose commitment depends on conditions, you're not disqualified. You're just being called higher. God is not interested in flashes of passion that flicker and die out. He's looking for those who burn steady, who pray even when no one answers, who serve even when no one thanks them, who love even when the room is quiet, who stay when it's not fun or fast, but still faithful. And maybe this is your season to shift. From starting strong to finishing well. Maybe you've spent years proving your worth through intensity, showing up in emotional bursts, then disappearing when it gets hard. But now, maybe God is calling you to become someone who moves from noise to depth, from moments of inspiration to a lifestyle of integrity, because the people who change the world, who carry weight in the kingdom, who leave legacies that heaven honors, aren't always loud, but they are steady. They don't always shine, but they endure. They don't just promise, they persevere. And in the final part of this journey, we'll bring it all together, what consistency, kindness, and character truly look like in everyday, ordinary moments, the ones no one celebrates, but God never overlooks. Some people will treat your kindness like a weakness. They'll interpret your patience as permission. They'll assume your silence means surrender. And if you let them, they'll keep withdrawing from your soul while giving nothing back, until all you have left is fatigue wrapped in confusion. But here's the truth. Just because you're soft doesn't mean you're naive. Just because you love deeply doesn't mean you have to lose yourself. And just because you forgive often doesn't mean you're obligated to stay in spaces that continually harm you. You were not created to be consumed by people who only know how to take. You were created to carry the image of a God who gives with wisdom, who loves with clarity, who sets boundaries and still remains full of grace. And maybe somewhere along the way, you started confusing love with tolerance. Maybe you thought that being like Christ meant letting others step over your peace, your voice, your soul. But even Jesus walked away from crowds who refused to hear. Even he withdrew from those who rejected truth. Even he said, "That's enough." So when someone keeps crossing the line, when they keep pulling from your compassion but never changing, never growing, never honoring the heart you've offered, you have the right to say, "No more." You have the strength to choose distance without guilt. You have the authority to redefine access, not because you hate them, but because you've finally learned to love yourself the way God always intended you to. And when you do that, when you stop letting people exploit your gentleness, you don't become cold, You become clear. You begin to walk in balance. You begin to lead from wisdom. You begin to give from a place of abundance, not obligation, because true love, real, mature, God-shaped love never thrives in imbalance. It honors both compassion and clarity. It knows when to stay and when to step back. It holds others with grace but holds itself with just as much dignity. And if someone walks away because you chose to protect your peace, let them go without bitterness. Let them leave without explanation, because if their love depended on your silence, their absence is not a loss. It's freedom. So if you're still wondering how to see someone's true character, you don't need a long list. You don't need to wait 4 years. Just watch 2 things closely: how they treat you when they no longer need you, and how they respond when you begin to honor yourself. Because character isn't proven in intensity, it's revealed in consistency. It's not found in how someone enters your life, but in how they stay when the spotlight dims. Not in what they say when all is well, but in what they do when the benefit is gone. That's when the truth walks in. And maybe today, as you let this sink in, you're realizing it's time to stop chasing those who only loved your usefulness. It's time to stop explaining your growth to those committed to misunderstanding it. It's time to stop shrinking just to fit back into spaces you've already outgrown, because you weren't created to live on borrowed worth. You were called to walk in truth. So choose wisely, love deeply, speak gently, but stand firmly. Because in the end, when the applause fades, when the rooms grow quiet, and when the lights finally dim, what remains isn't what people thought of you. It's who you chose to become when no one else was looking. That is your character. Let them go with grace. Let yourself grow with peace, and let your life speak louder than any words ever could. Thank you for your listening. Goodbye and see you in the next video.